Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into the work of Edwin Duggan.
Oh, interesting choice. I'm excited to learn more about him, too.
He's a human rights advocate in the UK. You might know him from his anti-knife crime campaigns.
Yeah, I've seen his name pop up a few times, but I'm not super familiar with all he does.
Well, that's what we're here for. We're going beyond those headlines, really trying to understand what makes his approach so unique.
Sounds like a plan. What kind of information do we have to work with for this deep dive?
We've got a pretty good mixed background info, some details about his current projects, and the big one, the story behind Jade's Law.
Jade's Law. Now that rings a bell. Wasn't that something to do with parental rights?
Exactly. He was instrumental in getting that legislation passed. It's a pretty powerful story, rooted in personal tragedy, actually.
Wow, okay, I'm definitely intrigued now. This is going to be good.
So let's jump in. First things first, who is this guy? Fill me in on Edwin Duggan's background.
Okay, so Duggan is based in Flintshire, Wales, very much an active member of his local community.
Okay, community-focused. Got it. What else?
The thing that really stands out is his dedication to human rights. It seems to be the driving force behind everything he does, all his campaigns, his initiatives. It all comes back to that core value.
Makes sense considering he's a human rights advocate. Anything else about his background that helps us understand his approach?
Well, he also has a law degree, LLB Hans, to be precise.
Ah, so he actually knows the ins and outs of the legal system. That must be a huge asset in his work, especially when trying to push for legislative changes like Jade's Law.
Oh, absolutely. Having that legal knowledge gives him a real edge when navigating those complex systems.
So we've got this picture of him, community-minded, passionate about human rights, legally savvy. But what kind of change is he actually pushing for? We know about the anti-knife crime work, but what else is he involved in?
You're right. It's important to see the bigger picture. He's not a single-issue advocate. Take, for instance, his recent partnership with Age Connects Northeast Wales.
Age Connects. I don't think I'm familiar with them.
They're a fantastic organization that supports older adults in the community. Duggan teamed up with them to address the impact of the vote against winter fuel payments for UK pensioners.
That's interesting. So he saw a specific need in his community, something impacting vulnerable people, and he jumped in to help.
Exactly. He's not just focused on these big national campaigns. He's also attentive to the immediate needs of those around him, trying to make a tangible difference in the lives of everyday people.
That's a great point. It's about taking action on multiple levels, addressing both those immediate local needs and working towards larger systemic change.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us perfectly to Jade's Law. This is a perfect illustration of how those two approaches intersect.
Okay, let's talk about that. I know this law stemmed from a personal tragedy. Can you walk me through what happened?
In 2021, Duggan's friend, Jade Ward, was murdered by her estranged partner. This is a horrific situation.
Awful. I can only imagine the grief and trauma her loved ones went through.
It gets even more complicated and tragic because Jade's murderer was also the father of their 4 children.
Oh gosh, that adds another layer of complexity to an already devastating situation.
And here's where the legal aspect comes in, and where the real impetus for Jade's Law arises. Even though he was in prison for Jade's murder, the father retained his parental rights.
You're kidding. So even after taking their mother's life, he still had a legal say in their lives.
It's hard to fathom, right? Imagine the pain and injustice Jade's family must have felt, having to deal with that on top of their grief. The man who murdered their daughter, their sister, still held this power over their lives.
It's almost unthinkable. So how did Duggan respond to this? I can't imagine he just sat back and let this injustice stand.
He was outraged, obviously. He felt this overwhelming sense of injustice, not just for Jade, but for her family, for those children who had already lost so much. And he decided to take action.
What did he do?
He channeled that anger, that grief, into a campaign for change. He assembled a team of volunteers. They called themselves Team Jade, and they set out to change the law.
That's incredible. Talk about turning personal tragedy into a force for good. So what did this campaign look like? How did they go about trying to change the law?
Their main focus was a petition calling for Jade's Law. They worked tirelessly, gathering signatures, raising awareness, making sure people understood the injustice of the existing system.
Must have been a lot of work, especially while dealing with their own grief and loss.
It was an uphill battle, for sure. But they were determined, driven by this deep sense of purpose, and their efforts paid off. The petition garnered a staggering 130,000 signatures.
130,000? That's incredible. But signatures alone don't change the law. How did they translate that public support into actual legislative change?
That's where Duggan's legal expertise really came into play. He realized that to make a real impact, they couldn't just rely on raising awareness. They had to get involved in the nitty-gritty of the legislative process.
So what did he do? Did he lobby politicians? Testify before Parliament?
He took an even more direct approach. Duggan decided to draft the legislation himself.
He wrote the law. Wow, talk about taking initiative. I guess that law degree really came in handy.
It did, and it speaks volumes about his dedication to this cause. He wasn't content to just sit on the sidelines and hope for the best. He wanted to make sure that the law was crafted in a way that truly addressed the issue, in a way that honored Jade's memory and protected other families from enduring the same kind of pain.
So what exactly does Jade's Law do? How does it change things?
At its core, the law automatically suspends the parental responsibility of anyone convicted of murdering their partner. So in a situation like Jade's, the perpetrator would immediately lose those rights upon conviction.
That makes sense. It removes that added burden from the victim's family having to fight for those rights to be revoked.
Exactly. It shifts the focus from the victim's family having to prove why the perpetrator shouldn't have those rights to the perpetrator having to demonstrate why they should. It's a huge shift in power dynamics.
That sounds like a much fairer and more just approach. It recognizes the gravity of the crime and its impact on the victims' families. But it's interesting that it doesn't completely strip away the convicted person's rights.
That's an important distinction. The law doesn't permanently sever parental rights. The convicted individual still has the right to apply for reinstatement of their parental responsibility, but they have to go through a rigorous process. They need to demonstrate to the court why it's in the best interest of the child to have those rights restored.
So it's about finding that balance, right? Protecting the vulnerable while still upholding due process.
Exactly. It ensures that decisions about parental rights are made with the child's well-being at the forefront, while also acknowledging the severity of the crime and its impact on the victim's family.
It's a really nuanced approach. It's not about revenge. It's about ensuring that the legal system prioritizes the safety and well-being of the children while also acknowledging the harm that's been done.
You hit the nail on the head. Jade's Law is a testament to Duggan's commitment to justice, his legal acumen, and his ability to channel personal tragedy into meaningful change. It's a powerful example of how one person can make a real difference in the lives of others.
Absolutely. But we've only scratched the surface of his work. There's so much more to explore.
We've got lots more to unpack, don't we? I can't wait to delve into his other initiatives and see how they all connect back to his core values.
Me too. So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dig deeper into Edwin Duggan's advocacy work, particularly his efforts in the fight against knife crime. So we've really gotten a sense of Edwin Duggan's commitment to justice and his willingness to take action. We've talked about Jade's Law, but now I'm curious about his work on anti-knife crime. How does that fit into the bigger picture of his advocacy?
That's a great question, and it's a perfect example of how Duggan's work might seem focused on separate issues, but it's all interconnected when you look closer.
Okay, I'm all ears. Explain how advocating for something like Jade's Law connects with anti-knife crime efforts.
On the surface, you see a law focused on parental rights after a murder, and then campaigns to reduce knife violence. They seem distinct, right? But let's dig a little deeper and consider what drives both.
You're talking about getting to the root causes, right? Like, both efforts aim to protect people and prevent violence, ultimately.
Exactly. That's the common thread in all of Duggan's work. Whether it's Jade's Law or anti-knife crime initiatives, it stems from this desire to safeguard human rights and create a safer society.
That makes sense. He's tackling the problem from multiple angles, not just reacting to tragedies after they happen, but trying to prevent them.
Exactly. It's not just about addressing the symptoms of violence. It's about going after the root causes, understanding those are complex and interconnected, and that you need multiple strategies for change.
So it's not an either. Real change needs work on multiple levels, individual, community, and systemic, all at the same time.
You got it. And that leads to another crucial part of Duggan's approach: his deep commitment to community engagement. He's not some distant figure. He's embedded in his community, collaborating with local organizations and individuals.
Like we saw with his work on the winter fuel payments issue, he saw a need in his community and jumped into action. Does he take a similar approach with anti-knife crime?
Absolutely. He believes in grassroots action. Yeah. He's not just pushing for top-down policy changes. He's out there working with people, raising awareness, educating young people about the dangers of knife crime, fostering a culture of peace.
So it's combining legislative efforts with on-the-ground community work, a much more holistic and effective approach, I imagine.
Exactly. That's what's so great about Duggan's strategy. He's weaving together individual action, community engagement, and systemic reform. Not one or the other, but all of them working together for lasting change.
It's inspiring how one person's passion and dedication can have such a ripple effect. He's literally changing laws and shaping the conversation.
He is, and it reminds us we all have the potential to make a difference. His story shows it's not about waiting for someone else to fix things. It's about stepping up, getting involved, advocating for changes we want.
A true role model. Now, before we move on, I want to remind everyone we've only scratched the surface of his work. There's a lot more to explore, and I encourage everyone to check out his website, learn about his initiatives, and find ways to get involved.
That's a great point. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's always more to learn.
Right. This deep dive has gotten me thinking about this kind of citizen-led change for other pressing issues.
You mean beyond Jade's Law and anti-knife crime? What do you have in mind?
What if we took Duggan's approach, this combination of activism, legal expertise, and community engagement, and applied it to other areas? Like, what about environmental protection or healthcare reform, even education?
That's a fascinating thought. Could this model be replicated and adapted to tackle different challenges? It's exciting to consider the possibilities.
It really is. It makes you realize the power of individual action, the importance of collective effort, and how ordinary citizens can become catalysts for big change.
So true. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Edwin Duggan's work, let's hold on to that sense of possibility. Remember, we don't have to be legal experts or seasoned activists to make a difference.
Every single one of us can help build a more just and compassionate world. Start by identifying the issues you're passionate about, connecting with your community, and taking action, even small actions.
Beautifully said. On that note, it's time to move to our final thoughts and reflections on the incredible work of Edwin Duggan.
It's incredible to see the impact Edwin Duggan has had. From grassroots campaigns to shaping legislation, he's really shown how much one person can do.
He's such a great example of what happens when you combine community engagement with passionate advocacy and a real dedication to justice.
What strikes me is how he connects all these different issues, bringing them together under this broader idea of human rights.
Right. It reminds us that the fight for justice has so many sides, and you can't just address one thing in isolation. You need that holistic approach.
Edwin Duggan's story is proof that change is possible, even when things seem really challenging. He's shown us that ordinary people like you and me can be the starting point for extraordinary change.
That's a message that goes beyond any specific law or campaign. It's a call to action for everyone to look around their communities and see where they can contribute to building a more just world.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's think about how we can carry Edwin Duggan's inspiration forward. Let's look for ways to make a difference in our own communities, stand up for what we believe in, and remember that even small actions can have a ripple effect.
Because, as we've seen with Edwin Duggan, change really does start with a single step, a spark of passion, and the belief that things can get better.
It's been an inspiring journey exploring his work. I hope our listeners have learned something new, feel empowered to take action, and maybe even found a bit of hope for a brighter future.
I agree. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Edwin Duggan.
Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep believing in the power of human connection to change the world.